pat on the back or a high five to the person beside you just to say, congratulations for making it to service today. Lots of interaction here today. Rachel, I feel your pain. So we welcome you guys here. I just wanted to go over a couple of the announcements. Please pray for my family. We're going to Vancouver. And Wednesday to Saturday, I have this church planting assessment that they're going to kind of look at me and kind of, I guess, interview me and judge me based on how good of a church planter I may or may not be. Hopefully it's a good result because I've already planted the church, so I'll tell you what happens later, or maybe not. But we're going to Vancouver, so if you guys have any awesome places to eat, I know some of you guys are from Vancouver, please let me know so we can go. I think most of it's all taken care of by the church, but we're taking our family. And also, so for the youth, if you're in grade 6 to 12, if you're not a child and you're not downstairs with Erica, and you're not in university, that's all of you guys there, University of Guelph. We're going to meet today after service. We'll be downstairs, so we'll have our food first, and then we'll go downstairs and we'll have time. One thing definitely, it's hard in a small church like this to have things for the youth, and we thank you for last year. You guys were with us all throughout last year, so I want to see all of you guys downstairs after, and we can kind of get to know each other a little bit more, get to know God a little bit more through that time. And for the small groups, thank you for those who signed up for small groups for the first time with those cards. I know some of the people who filled out those cards had already been part of the small group. I'm hoping that everyone who didn't sign up for small groups is because they're already part of one, especially with the Hamilton, Mississauga, the North GTA. I said GTA because I wasn't sure they sometimes meet in Vaughan, sometimes downtown, so they're all over the place, So I said GTA, and then also, what's the last one? Youth, and then also, there's a Korean one as well, but I know you guys just protected that Multiply is a resource that we're going through. If you're in a small group and you haven't picked one of these up, please let me know. Pick them up for $5. You won't find it for $5. I think it's like $15 on Amazon, but we got a big box set before, so we can sell it for $5 just to cover the cost. This is the back is on the website. It says it's Multiply is designed as a simple resource that you can use to begin making disciples. Our prayer is that it will give you the confidence you need to step out in faith and disciple the people whom God has placed in your life. And so for this week and the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be talking about discipleship, talking about kind of the heart of this book and the heart of why we chose this book for our small groups. And so today I'm going to be speaking on the call and the heart of Multiply. So why don't we all stand as we read from Matthew chapter 28, verse 18 to 20. For many of you, it might be a very, familiar passage, especially if you've been part of AI. This is you say it all the time. So let's read that together. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." Amen. Please be seated. Today I'm going to keep it a little bit short because we're just going to be talking about that. There's some things for our church that we have planned, so I'm going to run to a meeting after that. But I just want to share with you the heart of Multiply, the heart of making disciples, and the call to make disciples. There's something about preaching, when you're young, you learn a lot of the things that you learn, but part of who you are as an adult, you learn from other people. You imitate other people. You see how other people do things, and as a parent now, I'm a father now, I realize how much of my parents and the way that I am is a reaction to what I see my parents do. It's either the complete opposite, because I had it done to me, so I'm not going to do that, or it's something very similar too. And I feel like it's that with preaching as well. For some reason, when I begin a sermon, I feel like I have to put in some non-Christian material, like some kind of story or something to bridge before, like to warm you guys up so that I can get into the teaching. It's very weird for me, and I just noticed it this week. And I realized it's because as I was growing up, my formative years, I went to Westside Community Church, and the pastor there, Pastor Paul, he never started with kind of going into the teaching. He always started with some random thing. So the reason why I'm telling you this is because even as I was preparing this thing and I put it in, I was like, it doesn't sit right with me, but at the same time, I feel like I have to do it. So if you look at Matthew 28, it's Jesus' last words. So I'm going to share with you some of the famous or funny or ironic last words of some people. There's a guy named Joseph Wright. He was a linguist who edited the English Dialect Dictionary. Do you know what his last word was? Dictionary. Interesting. George Orwell, the famous author, his last written words were, "At 50, everyone has the face that he deserves." Then he died at the age of 46. He never got that. A lot of people, when they died, Jean-Paul Sartre, was it, where is it? Jean-Paul Sartre, it's all here somewhere. Vince Lombardi, an American reporter, Owen McIntyre, they would look to their spouse and they say, "I love you," or "Happy anniversary," or something along those lines. So the last words that you have are very kind of meaningful. And the last one I want to share with you today is Leonardo da Vinci. He says, "I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have." And those were his kind of last words. And it's crazy how Leonardo da Vinci, like Mona Lisa, everything, all that stuff, he was not happy with that. And finally, Nostradamus. You guys know who Nostradamus is? This famous kind of guy who looked into the future. He said, "This time tomorrow by sunrise I shall no longer be here." And he was right, because he died that next day. The reason why I share this with you is because with Jesus' last words, when it's someone's last words, it's something that you want to remember. You usually remember that by. And so Jesus' last words were this: "Therefore, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you to the very end of the age." Now, if you think about this, he's saying this to his disciples after he died on the cross and he was resurrected. He told his disciples to meet him on this mountain in Galilee, and he gathers them and he says to them these last words. To these people who had been following him for the last 3 and a bit years, and they held on to these words. They were listening and they were hearing these words of Jesus, and they held on to this so deeply, right? We can see in the history of what happened after with Acts and then continuing throughout history. The followers of Jesus' 12 disciples, they held on to these words and they put them into practice, right? Because they loved Jesus deeply. This was his last command to the people that he loved, the people who followed him. And so they took this and they put it into action. And you can see that, throughout all of, what Jesus said, that his disciples took hold on to everything that Jesus held on to completely, right? Everything Jesus said. We have the Bible, the 4 Gospels of the Bible, because the disciples remembered and they tried to recall and put into writing everything that Jesus had said to them, taught them, every experience that they had with him, and they put it into writing. Why? Because they wanted to remember Jesus. They wanted to remember him. Why? And why did they want to remember him? Because they loved him deeply. If it's not someone you love, right? It's not someone you care for, when they die, and you don't really remember what they said, right? You don't really care about what they did in their life, if it's someone you don't know, what they said in their lifetime, it doesn't really affect you. But if it's someone that you care for, someone that you love, then you remember those things. You look back and you think fondly of those moments and of those experiences. Whether it's a family member or someone that you love, you look back on the time that you spent with them, and then you try to recall the things that they said. And sometimes certain phrases, certain experiences, they recall that memory of that person. Right? You remember them. And can I just take a little bit of an aside here? I think some of us have to think about what that means. The implications of what I just said. Some of us are living in reaction to something that someone said sometime in our life. I remember after my first year, and maybe even now, but after my first year I was pretty fat. The Frosh 15, I was more like the Frosh 15 kilos. That Frosh 40, I gained a lot. I was at 195 pounds by the end of first year, right before going to second year. Last Thursday I reached 190, so I was like, okay, I need to change this, do something to change my life. But at 195, I remember some good friends of mine, some people that I knew very well, some family members of one of our leaders in our church. These two girls, Rebecca and Hannah, and Rebecca I spent a lot of time with, they would constantly tell me how fat I was. Every time they looked at me, they're like, Stephen, you're so fat. And you're so fat. And because I heard that so much, I'm like, okay, I resolved in second year to lose that weight. And I did. I lost 35 pounds in second year. I got down to 170. And I think eventually got down to 165 later on. But because of the voices that every time I see them, it's just, you're fat. And Hannah went to my church, so I would see her every Sunday. Rebecca also went to my church, but I also hung out with her because she was dating my friend as well. So I would see her like 3 or 4 times a week, and all the time, you're fat. And so I remembered that voice. That voice resonated within me, and I knew that I had to lose weight. But sometimes we listen to the voices of people who don't have our best interests in mind. I want to believe at the heart of what Hannah and Rebecca were saying to me was because they loved me and they cared for me and they couldn't stand seeing me this way. But sometimes we listen to the voices of people who aren't important to us. Or sometimes we listen to the voices of people who don't have our future in mind, our best interests in mind. And we let that voice be louder than the promises of God, who declares that He is with us to the very end of the age, as it says in today's passage. Louder than the promise of God that He declares that all authority has been given to Him and that He sends us out in the world. Louder than the declaration that Jesus makes to us in our life, and He says, take heart, I have overcome the world, when we face all the troubles and the tribulations in front of us. And sometimes we have to listen, not to the voices that don't have our best interests in mind. Sometimes we have to realize that the voices that we're hearing all the time are people who don't love us, and that we should not love as well. And we should listen to the people who love us, and to the one who has our best interests in mind, and that is Jesus Christ. And that's not the main thing I want to share today, but it's something that as I was preparing, I believe that someone needed to hear today. As I'm going on, while the command to go into the world and make disciples of all nations, that might have been Jesus' last words, how do we actually remember that? In Multiply, the authors write, Christians today are not known for making disciples. We have developed a culture where ministers minister and the rest of us sit back and enjoy church from a comfortable distance. This is not what God intends for His church. Every Christian is called by God to minister. You are called to make disciples. And it's good that that's at the beginning of the book. It kind of makes you want to read the book more. It challenges you. But that's true, isn't it? It's not just the ministers that are called to disciple people, but for everyone. When Jesus was talking to His disciples, He was talking to His leaders, but that was all His followers at the time. He was talking to His people, saying, go into the world and make disciples of all nations. teaching them everything that I've commanded you. Why? Because that's what it means to be a disciple. And in the Greek, in Matthew was written in Greek, the word mathetes, where the word Matthew also comes from. But mathetes comes, and it means a learner, a disciple, a follower of Christ who learns the doctrines of Scripture and the lifestyle they require. And outside of Christianity, this word mathetes was used for any kind of learner, as opposed to a teacher. But also to people who followed a certain philosophy, because a lot of Greek thought at the time was these different philosophies. So the people who followed the sophist philosophy, they were called the mathetes, of the sophist tradition. Those who are of the Stoic tradition, they were the mathetes of the Stoic tradition. Those who followed Socrates and Aristotle and Plato, they were the mathetes of these philosophers. And so a mathetes meant, a disciple meant a follower, someone who was an adherent to this way of life, this teacher. And in 1 Corinthians 11:1, Paul says, "Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ." Meaning, be my disciple as I am Jesus' disciple. And I feel like that verse perfectly encapsulates what disciple means. It means imitation, copying, right? Following that leader, that teacher. And what did Jesus do? Jesus came here, he proclaimed the gospel, but that main mode of transmission of the gospel, there's a lot of times where he did go out into big crowds and teach. But his main mode of transmission was to gather a small group of people, the 12 disciples. And not only the 12, but he had an inner circle of 3 disciples. And to teach them and to pass on knowledge and to show them the way of right living and to be an example of what it means to live in right relationship with God. And then he expected the disciples to do the same in this last command. He said, everything that I have done with you, everything that I've spoken to you, I want you to do the same. This was his strategy to bring about the kingdom of God. This was his strategy to take this gospel not only in this small area in Jerusalem and in the Middle East, but to send it all across the world. And I think at the core of it, the reason why we don't follow that example is because we have a wrong view of what a church is. Like, in our mind, church means, everyone has, with certain words bring up certain pictures and certain metaphors and certain analogies. And I feel like for us, what we should be making disciples, we have a wrong view of what the church is. I have this parable I want to share with you. It's the parable of the bricklayers. And I don't know if you guys noticed these bricks. These are the bricks that are standing, that are piled outside that parking lot that's right there. So I just borrowed it for today's thing. I didn't want to buy bricks myself for that, saving the church money. But 3 bricklayers are asked, what are you doing? And these are bricklayers who are building this building. The first says, I'm laying bricks. The second bricklayer says, I'm building a church. And the third bricklayer says, I'm building the kingdom of God. Now the first bricklayer has a job. The second bricklayer has a career. But the third bricklayer has a calling. Depending on the way that they see their job, it affects the way that they approach that job, the attitude that they have around it. And it's a parable that doesn't have a lot of context, it doesn't have a lot of backstory, like who are these people, it doesn't matter. But I wonder how we view our calling or our activity of what we're doing here today. What are you guys here doing? Are you guys just going to church? Are you serving church? Are you worshiping God? How do you describe the activity that you are doing today? And what do you understand about this? And not only this thing right here, but what parts of it? I remember growing up in a traditional Korean church. It was so weird because they would have like in the Korean services, they would have like the praise that we have, right? But that was called like 준비 찬양 or preparatory praise, right? And it was almost like an optional thing. You know, you can come to it now, but the real service starts when the choir starts singing this hymn. That's the real service. Or, you know, sometimes some people, you know, they don't come. You know, they specifically come. Oh, I'm late for church, but it's okay, as long as I get there by the sermon time. As if the sermon time was the only important part of what it means to gather together in this corporate worship of God as a church together. Or, you know, as soon as the service ends, and is that church? What about the time that we have after, the fellowship that we have after? What about Monday to Saturday? What is it that we do as a church? Or what parts? And how do we view each part of what we do as a community together? And I feel like there's a lot of ways that we can see the church. You know, we can see it as from the outside looking in, we're just another social group, right? We're a group of people gathered together over a common interest, a common gathering. And there's a lot of, especially these days, there's a lot of things that are like that. Like, there's this meetup groups that meet up over different things. Like if you want to, go biking together, and you don't have anyone to bike with, you can go on like this website and they'll point you towards a group where you can go bike together. I ran into an acquaintance of mine through Starbucks, and he was meeting. There's this random group of like Korean, Filipino, Brazilian, and Spanish guys. They were all just there, right? And I was like, oh, what are you guys doing? He's like, the Korean girl was teaching the Filipino girl Korean, and the Filipino girl was teaching her English. And then they kind of met this Brazilian guy and this Spanish guy. The Spanish guy also wanted to learn Korean from the Korean girl, so she was teaching him Korean, while his partner, the Brazilian guy, would teach her Spanish. And so it was a weird, man, but there's so many different ways of social group. I remember I was doing my internship at Evangel Hall, which is a homeless shelter. And most of the time there's church groups coming in to serve community dinner. But one time there was this just random groups. Like they just met up together to serve people, homeless people, a meal. And so in this social group gathering, if we see our church as primarily a social group, that's the way that we approach it. That's the way that we enter into it. Or we can see it as a community center, you know? Like a community center, like a YMCA, YWCA, has a lot of programs. There's daycare, there's something for the children, there's something for the youth, there's something for the young adults and the adults, and there's something for people, you know, there's AA meetings there, and there's gyms. You know, a community center has all these various services and programs. And sometimes when you go into a church, you can have that kind of feeling as well. Right? I'm going there for the kids ministry. I'm going there for the youth ministry. I'm going there because there's a singles ministry happening, or there's young moms ministry. Or a lot of us, we go to church and we see church like a restaurant. We go there to be fed, right? And like the latest church is this latest hip restaurant with the nicest menu. And then the sermons are like the latest, the best sermons. You know, those are the best restaurants. And some people, like, if you go to like a Hillsong or something like that, you have to line up even to get into church. And we go there just to be fed, to hear this word of God. Or sometimes we treat church like a hospital. And we go there to treat our immediate spiritual, you know, aches and illnesses. Sometimes we see it as a social service, where it's this organization that exists to serve the needs of others, to help others. And sometimes we look at church like a university. You know, we go there to learn, to learn, and study the Bible. You know, the way that we see church, the way that we understand church, the way that we treat church will affect the way that we actually participate. And I feel like I was trying to think of a right analogy, and And I don't think there's an institution like the church. I don't think there's an institution in society that is like the church, that is like the church is supposed to be. But the thing that I thought of was a virus. You know, a virus is made up of genetic material, right? That's the main core of it, and then there's this protein code that protects the virus. And so this virus goes into different host organisms, and the whole point of it is to replicate, and it does that through a variety of transmission vectors. Let me know if I'm wrong. It's been a long time since I've been at U of T learning this stuff. But that whole thing about a virus is that it's made to replicate. And the genetic material of the church is what? What is our DNA? What is our RNA? What's the code that defines who we are? And that's the gospel. And that's the gospel. And I think that protein, the protein code that is around this is the message, how we translate that message. And how we translate it isn't a form of things, it's us. We are how the gospel is translated to different people. And the host, what is the host? The host is the context that we're in. And we go in, and our job is to replicate and duplicate ourselves and to create other viruses. And the church is the main vector of the gospel, of this DNA, of this virus. That without the church, with people, whenever people come into contact with this mode of transmission, you know, if a virus is transmitted sexually, then you would have to have sex to have it translated. If it's translated airborne, it has to be in air, and when you breathe that air, you get it. And the church is the same way. That we're this transmission vector for the gospel. And that when people encounter the church, they should be infected with the gospel. That's the whole point of it. You know, we're called to replicate what we are as Jesus' disciples. I wonder if that's the case for us. And that's the hope and the heart behind why we're doing Multiply. Because at the heart of it, as a Christian, because you carry this virus that is the gospel, right? You carry this identity that shapes you, that defines you, and that inside of you wants to replicate, that God wants to create fruit out of you guys. Are you guys able to do that? Do you guys know what it means to create a disciple? Do you guys know how to do that? And that's why we're doing this curriculum together as a small group. Because as a Christian, we're called, at the heart of who we are, we're called not to come together and create this kind of thing, you know, come together and learn a lot about the Bible, know a lot about the Bible. We're not called to come together and be good people. No. At the heart of it is because we've been transformed by the gospel. We're called to make disciples of other people. We learn, we come to this church, we come to this gathering so that we can learn what it means to disciple others and to be a disciple, and then we transmit that in our daily relationships, in our small groups outside of church, in our everyday conversations with people, in our workplaces, in our schools. We're called to replicate that because we're this virus that is unstoppable. All it can do is replicate. That's all it's meant to do. And I feel like as a church and as Christians, maybe we add too many other priorities, too many other callings in our life. You know, it's my prayer that as the Well Church, that we won't see like following Christ as a job. That we won't see it as a career. We don't see it as a hobby, that we see it as a calling. That we're called to do this all the time, every time. Why? Because we do it all, because it's our calling, it's who we are. You know, when it's just a job for you, this Sunday you clock in and you clock out. Come in, you give your worship, maybe give a little offering, maybe do your thing, you know, and that's it. You've done your Christian duty. When you see it as a career, you'll do that for the rest of your life until kind of retire. But as a calling, it's all the time. All the time. You have to help people. You have to be, you have to be a Christian at all times. You have to, replicate what it means and follow Jesus at every time. And I pray that the world will be filled with people who see discipleship and calling. And I encourage you guys all to, join these small groups for no other reason. It's not just a program, but so that you can learn what it means to be a disciple who learns how to make disciples. Let's pray.